I used to think betrayal came with noise, slammed doors, shouted names, tears you could collect in handfuls. But when it finally arrived in my life, it sounded like laughter. My fiancé, slaughter. And a second later, my sister's name glowing on his phone screen. That's all it took. One soft sound. One flash of light. And suddenly, every corner of our apartment felt like a stage set built on lies. He looked up, still smiling. Linda found a cheaper florist, he said. His tone was casual, the way people talk when nothing's wrong, when they're hoping you won't notice the tiny fracture beneath their words. I smiled back. My lips felt like they belonged to someone else. The room smelled faintly of eucalyptus, the candle she'd gifted us last week, burning low on the counter. She said it would help me stay calm while planning the wedding. I almost laughed at the irony, but my throat was too tight for sound. Rain pressed against the windows, slow and steady, like it had nowhere else to go. The lamplight fell across the dining table, scattering over ribbons, fabric swatches, color samples, all the symbols of the perfect day we were building. Linda's handwriting covered sticky notes on the fridge, confirm seating chart, ask Mark about playlist. She'd taken over the planning months ago, and at first, I'd been grateful. She had the taste, the charm, the energy I didn't. But lately, that gratitude had started to curdle. Mark, let's say that was his name, scrolled through his phone again, a small buzz. His thumb paused. I caught the reflection of his screen in the window, blue light against glass, a shape I couldn't fully make out. My pulse skipped, quick and quiet. She's just confirming details, he said, not looking at me. The spoon I'd left in my mug trembled against the ceramic. The apartment felt smaller suddenly. The walls seemed to lean closer, listening. I took a slow breath and stared at the checklist in front of me. Flowers, photographer, deposit, dress fitting, all the little bricks we were stacking to build our future. But right then, they looked like debris, like the aftermath of something already fallen apart. Linda had always been the center of every room. Even when we were kids, she knew how to hold attention like it was oxygen. I used to envy that. Now I felt it like a glare. The last time she'd come over, she'd walk straight into our kitchen, barefoot, humming, familiar, too familiar. She'd touched Mark's arm when she joked. They'd shared that easy, conspiratorial laugh siblings-in-law weren't supposed to share yet. I'd brushed it off. I'd brushed everything off. Because love teaches you denial before it teaches you wisdom. Mark placed his phone face down on the counter and walked over to me. His hand brushed my shoulder, light, practiced. "You okay?" "Just thinking," I said. "Don't overthink." He smiled, and the words felt like a command disguised as comfort. When he turned away, I stared at the faint glow still bleeding through the edge of his phone. I wanted to pick it up. I didn't. I wanted to ask. I didn't. Instead, I rinsed my cup, letting the water run too long, the hiss covering the sound of my heartbeat. The drain gurgled, a tiny metallic gasp, and the candle flickered out just then, as if the room itself had stopped holding its breath. Outside, the rain thickened into a curtain, blurring the streetlights into amber ghosts. I pressed my fingers to the window pane. It was cold enough to sting. My reflection floated next to his behind me. Two silhouettes, close but distant, like strangers rehearsing intimacy. The air was heavy, perfumed with wax and anxiety. That's when it hit me. The kind of quiet realization that doesn't explode. It seeps. Sometimes, betrayal doesn't show up as a confession. It shows up as a message you weren't meant to see, a silence that feels rehearsed, a smile that ends half a second too soon. And once you start noticing those half seconds, nothing feels safe again. The night stretched longer than it should have. Every tick of the kitchen clock sounded too clear, too deliberate, like time was reminding me to pay attention. Mark had gone to bed early, claiming a headache. The apartment was quiet, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the wet shuffle of cars outside. I stood by the table, surrounded by scraps of wedding planning, the little symbols of love that suddenly looked like props from someone else's story. Linda's voice echoed faintly in my head, her laugh spilling into memory. "You're lucky," she'd said last week, hands deep in a pile of invitation samples. "Mark actually listens. Most men just nod." I'd smiled back then, smiled because I believed her. Because who would doubt their own sister? I used to think loyalty ran in our blood, but that night, staring at her name glowing from the phone Mark had left charging on the counter, I started wondering if it could also be the thing that drains it. The screen dimmed, then brightened again as another message came through. I didn't touch it. I just watched the light flicker across the marble countertop, like a heartbeat too fast for comfort. My hands trembled. Not with rage, just confusion, that deep, quiet confusion that feels heavier than anger ever could. I told myself it was harmless. Maybe they were finalizing the florist deposit. Maybe she'd found a new venue. My throat tightened at how easily I could make excuses for both of them. I walked to the window, arms folded tight, the air thick with eucalyptus and leftover dinner. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the street still glistened under the orange lamplight. A couple crossed the road holding hands, laughing about something I'd never hear. Their laughter echoed faintly against the glass and made the apartment feel even emptier. When I finally moved, it wasn't toward the phone, it was toward the wall mirror. The reflection hit me in pieces, hair undone, lipstick faded, shoulders tense. My own face looked like someone who'd been trying to be fine for too long. I thought about the way Linda had hugged Mark at the engagement dinner, too tight, too familiar, and how I'd told myself not to be ridiculous. I'd told myself love means trust. But that night, I wasn't sure if I meant his love or hers. The phone buzzed again, once, twice. I felt each vibration in my chest like an echo. The sound didn't belong in the room anymore. It belonged somewhere colder, somewhere outside the version of us I'd been building. I wanted to ignore it. I really did. But my curiosity had teeth now, sharp and patient. I stepped closer. The glow painted the underside of the cabinets a ghostly blue. I didn't read the screen. My courage didn't stretch that far yet, but I saw enough to recognize the small photo beside her name. It wasn't the one she used on social media, the one with the staged smile. It was different, candid, close, taken by someone who saw her when she wasn't posing. My chest tightened. I turned away quickly, grabbed a dish rag, and started wiping down an already spotless counter. The movement was mechanical, desperate. The smell of detergent stung my eyes. I wasn't crying, not yet. I just needed something to do with my hands before my thoughts spilled everywhere. When Mark stirred in the other room, I froze, rags still in my grip. I could hear the bedsheets rustle, the soft thud of his footsteps on the hardwood. He stepped into the kitchen, hair mussed, smile drowsy. "Can't sleep?" he asked. His voice was smooth, perfectly ordinary. I turned, half in shadow, just cleaning up. He glanced at the phone on the counter. His phone, her name still glowing faintly on the lock screen. For a second he hesitated, then picked it up, thumb moving fast, almost practiced. "Linda again," he said. "She never stops, huh?" I forced a breath through a stiff smile. "Guess she's committed." He kissed my cheek, the kind of gentle gesture that means everything in daylight and nothing after midnight. Then he went back to bed, the door clicking shut behind him like punctuation. I stayed there for a long time, listening to the faint hum of his charger and the quiet pulse of my own heartbeat. The air smelled faintly of wax and something burnt, a candle that had drowned in its own melted wick. In that silence, I realized how terrifying peace can be when it isn't real. And somewhere deep inside me, the first crack widened. Before everything started to unravel, life looked almost cinematic. Not perfect. I'm too old to believe in that. But steady in that quiet, adult way that makes you feel like maybe, finally, you've built something solid. Mark and I had our small routines that felt like rituals. His coffee exactly at 7:10, my late-night tea, the way our playlists overlapped only on Sunday mornings. Our apartment smelled like fresh laundry and cinnamon candles. The world outside kept moving, but inside, Things felt still, familiar, dependable. We met 3 years ago at a mutual friend's barbecue, the kind of humid summer evening when the sky turns copper and laughter carries down the street. He'd been standing by the grill, frowning at the tongs like they'd personally betrayed him. I remember the way the light hit his face, the tiny scar near his temple, the kind of detail you remember only when it matters later. He wasn't charming in that loud, practiced way. He was warm. He looked at people when they talked, really looked, and I mistook that for safety. Our story unfolded quietly. Weekend breakfasts, long drives, playlists that bled from one season into the next. I fell for him in fragments. The way he'd reach over to change the radio when a song made me cry. The way he'd rest his hand on the small of my back in crowded rooms. Not possessive, just grounding. He was calm in all the places I wasn't. I thought that was love. Maybe it was. And Linda, let's say that was my sister's name, she loved him too, just in a different way. At least that's what I told myself. She was there from the beginning. She'd helped me pick out the dress for our first anniversary, teased me when he showed up with flowers that didn't match the vase, and told everyone at Thanksgiving that she approved. Linda has always been that way. Magnetic, confident, the kind of person who knows exactly how to fill silence and make you grateful she did. Growing up, we were a strange mix of rivalry and devotion. Our parents used to joke that we balanced each other out. Her boldness, my caution. She could talk her way out of anything. I was the one holding the bag when things went wrong. She'd push boundaries, I'd clean up the aftermath. But when it was just us, late at night, whispering under the same blanket, we were inseparable. I trusted her in ways I didn't trust anyone else. That kind of bond feels unbreakable until it isn't. When Mark proposed, Linda was the first person I called. I still remember her scream through the phone. Joy so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. She cried when she saw the ring, hugged me so tight my earrings dug into her neck. "You deserve this," she said, brushing a stray hair from my face. "Finally, someone who sees you." It sounded sincere. Maybe it was. Maybe that's the cruelest part, how truth and performance can wear the same expression. She dove into planning like it was her wedding. At first, it was a blessing. She had spreadsheets, color palettes, Pinterest boards organized by season. She'd stay up late researching vendors while I half listened on the couch, exhausted after work. Mark adored her enthusiasm. "She's incredible," he'd say, shaking his head, impressed. I'd laugh, proud, because that was my sister. I didn't see the way her presence began to take up more space than mine. It started subtly. She'd text him about logistics when I was busy. She'd schedule meetings I hadn't agreed to yet. "You're drowning," she told me once, brushing off my irritation. "Let me handle it." And I did, because she was right. I was drowning. I thought she was saving me. There was a night, maybe 3 months before everything, when she came over with a bottle of wine to celebrate progress. We stayed up planning the seating chart, laughing about who'd sit where. Mark joined us halfway through, still in his work clothes, tie loose, smile, tired. The three of us ended up on the floor, surrounded by paper scraps and half-eaten pizza. Linda leaned back, barefoot, toes brushing the hem of his pant leg when she stretched. It was nothing. It had to be nothing. But that's how betrayal begins, in moments too small to name. She sent me home that night with leftover cake samples and a text saying, "You're glowing. Don't let the stress kill the joy." I remember smiling at my phone, stupidly grateful. I didn't realize I'd already handed her the blueprint to my happiness, and she'd started rewriting it. There's something strange about looking back on a time you thought was peaceful and realizing it was already coming apart. It's like watching an old home video where everyone's smiling, but you can see the storm forming just outside the frame. That's how it feels remembering those months before everything collapsed. The laughter, the plans, the tenderness, all of it was already shadowed by something I couldn't name yet. Linda had become a permanent fixture in our lives. Not a guest, not even a sister visiting, a presence. She'd drop by unannounced, barefoot, holding coffee for everyone, calling Mark by a nickname only I used. She'd flop onto our couch, tuck her legs under herself like she belonged there, and talk about wedding updates as if she were running a small corporation. It should have bothered me. Sometimes it did, but I'd convinced myself it was fine, that I was lucky to have someone care this much. That's the thing about love. It makes you interpret control as kindness. She talked to Mark like they shared an inside language. They laughed easily, quick bursts of connection that left me smiling along, unsure what I'd missed. I told myself it was innocent. After all, Mark was mine. We'd built a life together, one made of slow mornings and tired jokes and plans for a future I could almost touch. The kind of future that feels permanent until it isn't. I remember one Sunday morning in particular. The sunlight cut across the kitchen in perfect, cinematic streaks. I was still in my robe, hair a mess, coffee mug in hand. Linda had stayed over after a long night of finalizing vendor calls. She stood by the stove in one of my t-shirts, flipping pancakes, humming off key. Mark was leaning against the counter beside her, grinning, teasing her about burning breakfast. It looked so domestic that for a second, I felt like an intruder in my own home. I laughed to break the feeling, and the moment passed, but it left something behind. A trace of discomfort that didn't quite fade. Our mother used to say Linda had main character energy. She was the kind of person who could walk into chaos and make it orbit her. People adored her. Even when she was wrong, she was charming about it. Growing up, I used to envy that confidence, but after the engagement, it began to feel different. Like she wasn't orbiting anymore. She was moving in. At first, it was easy to justify. She was helping because she loved me, because she wanted the best, because that's what family does. But her help always came with a shadow. She'd make small comments about how Mark needed someone to keep him focused, how I was too trusting to handle the stress of the event. Once, when I hesitated to book a ridiculously expensive venue, she said softly, "It's a good thing he has me to talk sense into him." I'd laughed, a thin, brittle sound that cracked before it reached my throat. Mark, for his part, adored her energy. He said she balanced us out. I didn't realize then how wrong that word would become. Balance isn't when two people lean toward each other. It's when one starts leaning toward someone else, and you pretend not to see. We had dinners together, the three of us. Too many, in hindsight. I'd cook, they'd talk, their conversations flowing easily from jokes to ideas to wedding plans I wasn't even aware existed. Once, I walked into the room to hear Linda telling him a story about my childhood, something I'd only told her once years ago through tears. She laughed while she told it. He laughed, too. The air thinned until I could barely breathe. I tried to talk to her about boundaries once, in that gentle, careful way you do when you still believe honesty will fix things. She brushed my concern off with a laugh. "You're stressed," she said. "You always overthink when you're stressed. Don't ruin something good." Then she hugged me, her perfume filling my lungs, sweet and suffocating. After that, I stopped bringing it up. It felt easier to let her steer, easier to be the quiet one. Because confrontation has a cost, and I had already spent too much on peace. The night before our invitations went to print, I remember sitting on the floor surrounded by envelopes, the paper thick and cream-colored, my name embossed next to his. Linda was on speakerphone, telling Mark how elegant the font looked. Her voice was bright, familiar. I leaned my head against the wall, eyes half closed, listening to them laugh. It should have been a moment of joy. Instead, it felt like I was listening through glass, watching the two of them build something just beyond my reach. That's the problem with trust. It doesn't break all at once. It erodes quietly, grain by grain, until one day you realize the floor you're standing on has turned to dust. And when I finally looked down, it was already too late to stop the fall. It started with a typo, just one word that didn't belong. Linda had texted me late one night, "Tell Mark to check his email." I sent him the vows draft. Vows draft. My eyes caught on it like a splinter. I reread the message twice, waiting for my brain to correct it into something sensible. Maybe she meant venue draft, or vows template, something generic. but draft implied rewriting, editing, sharing, and I hadn't sent my vows to anyone, not even Mark. The apartment was dark, except for the blue light of the TV playing a show I wasn't watching. My phone screen glowed against the fabric of my blanket, her message sitting there like it knew it had no right to exist. I typed a question mark. Deleted it. Typed again. You mean the ceremony outline? Sent. Then stared at the screen until my reflection blurred into the glow. Her reply came fast. Yes, haha, sorry, long day. Then a voice note. Her laughter, easy, practiced, half a second too long. I told myself I was imagining things. People get tired. People mix words up. But my chest felt heavy, like my body knew something my mind refused to say out loud. The next morning, I woke before Mark. The air smelled faintly of his cologne, the one Linda said she'd picked out for his birthday. I hated myself for remembering that. The light filtered through the blinds in pale stripes that landed across the foot of the bed, where his phone sat charging. It buzzed once, quiet. I turned my head away, but my pulse didn't. At breakfast, he was cheerful, too cheerful. Linda said the bakery might be able to squeeze in another tasting, he said between bites of toast. She's handling the schedule. I nodded, pushing food around my plate. She's a lifesaver, he added, smiling. I don't know how you two keep track of all this. She's good at taking over, I said. He laughed, thinking I was joking. That day, everything I did felt slightly off. The world had lost its alignment. At work, I caught myself rereading emails 3 times, unable to focus. My reflection in the office glass looked foreign. Eyes a little wider, posture a little stiffer. Even my coworkers' small talk sounded muffled, like I was listening underwater. On my way home, I passed a flower shop. Roses in the window, wedding light, perfect. I almost went in to order more for the centerpieces, but the thought made my stomach twist. I walked past instead, my reflection following in the glass, a woman rehearsing calm while holding her breath. When I got home, the apartment smelled like vanilla and something faintly metallic, maybe candle smoke, maybe nerves. Mark was at the dining table, typing. He looked up and smiled, the kind that didn't reach the corners of his eyes. Hey, babe, Linda just texted. She found a better caterer. Of course she did. He chuckled. You sound jealous. I didn't answer. I just hung up my coat slowly, as if movement alone could buy me time to stay composed. Later that night, I found another clue. Not evidence exactly, but one of those tiny moments that prick at you and then refuse to fade. Mark's phone lit up on the nightstand while he showered. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't even near it, but the screen flashed bright enough to catch my eye. It was a text from Linda. Just one line. You were right. She didn't notice. The words blurred before I could process them. The message disappeared as quickly as it came. Probably deleted, maybe unsent. But the damage was already done. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulse hammering, the sound of running water filling the silence. My fingers dug into the bedsheet. I tried to breathe evenly, tried to tell myself it meant nothing, that context changes everything. But the truth settled deep, thick, undeniable, cold. When Mark came out, towel around his shoulders, steam following him like fog, I smiled. I smiled because I didn't know what else to do. He leaned down, kissed my forehead, his skin still damp. What's wrong? He asked, voice warm, easy. Nothing, I said, just tired. The lie came out so smooth, I almost admired it. That night, I couldn't sleep. The ceiling fan hummed a rhythm my thoughts couldn't match. Every few minutes, I checked my phone. No new messages, no updates, just silence. But silence, I was beginning to learn, can scream louder than any confession. And beneath that quiet, I could feel it, the first real shift. Something was moving, quietly, under the floorboards of my life. The next few days blurred together, a slow, nauseating loop of pretending everything was fine. That's the cruelest part about suspicion. It doesn't scream, it whispers. You go through your normal motions. Wake up, brush your teeth, answer texts, all while your gut quietly burns under the surface, telling you that something you love is already gone. Linda's presence began to feel heavier, like static in every conversation. She'd call at odd hours, her voice loud, cheerful, invasive. Sometimes she'd be on speakerphone with Mark while I was in the room. Their laughter would overlap, that easy kind of laughter people share when they've built their own world. I'd be folding laundry or making tea, listening to them joke about wedding playlists or guest lists, feeling like an extra in a movie where I was supposed to be the lead. One evening I came home early from work, rain clinging to my coat. The apartment smelled faintly of cologne and eucalyptus again, the scent Linda loved. Mark wasn't expecting me. He was sitting at the dining table, leaning forward, phone pressed to his ear, voice low. I froze just outside the doorway. I couldn't hear her words, but I knew that tone, the one he used with her, lighter, warmer than with anyone else. He saw me and straightened fast. "Hey, you're home early." "Yeah," I said, my voice calm, flat. "You're on with Linda?" He hesitated, just sorting out the photographer stuff. I dropped my bag by the counter, the weight of it thudding through the silence. "You know, she could call me too. It's my wedding." He smiled in that careful way people do when they're trying not to start a fight. "Babe, she's just helping." "I know." My tone was soft, but it carried something new underneath. Something he noticed. His smile faltered. That night, I sat on the couch with my laptop, trying to finish some work. Mark watched TV beside me, but he kept glancing at his phone, his thumb moving subtly, habitually. I didn't ask who he was texting. I didn't need to. Sometimes, silence is the only way to protect what's left of your dignity. At some point, I told myself I needed proof. Something real. Something undeniable. But even as the thought formed, my chest ached. Proof meant destruction. Proof meant there was no going back. 2 days later, fate handed me what I wasn't ready for. I'd stopped by Linda's apartment to drop off some printed vendor forms. Her place was immaculate. Minimalist, curated, the kind of neatness that always made me feel messy. She wasn't home, but the door was unlocked, probably expecting me. I set the folder on her kitchen counter. My eyes landed on her tablet lying open beside a half-finished latte. It wasn't curiosity that made me look. It was gravity. A quiet, terrible gravity. The screen was on a chat app. Messages in neat blue and gray bubbles. I didn't scroll. I didn't search. I didn't have to. Her most recent message sat right there, time-stamped less than an hour ago. "I wish we could talk without pretending it's about her." The air left my body all at once. The apartment suddenly felt too bright, too clean. My heartbeat was so loud it drowned out the hum of her fridge. I stepped back, knocking something off the counter. A spoon, maybe, the metallic clang echoing through the silence. I grabbed my bag, nearly tripping over her rug on the way out. In the car, my hands shook so badly I could barely fit the key into the ignition. I stared at the steering wheel until my vision blurred. Outside, the sky was bruised with storm clouds, the kind that press down on the city until you can feel the weight in your bones. I drove home without remembering the route. The whole world looked washed out. Traffic lights bleeding into the rain, strangers' faces smeared by motion. I parked 2 blocks away from our apartment, unable to make myself go inside. My fingers tapped against the wheel, restless, numb. I could taste metal in my mouth, the tang of adrenaline. By the time I walked through the door, Mark was at his desk, headphones on, humming to himself. He looked up and smiled. "Hey, everything okay?" I wanted to ask him, to throw the question back, to watch him flinch under the truth, but I couldn't. My voice wouldn't form words, so I smiled instead, small, mechanical. "Yeah, just tired." He nodded, turned back to his work, and the sound of his typing filled the space between us. Steady, rhythmic, oblivious. I went to the kitchen, opened the drawer, and stared at the pile of wedding invitations still waiting to be mailed. Our names printed in gold, entwined like a promise. My vision blurred again, the letters shimmering through a haze of unshed tears. Linda had written the calligraphy. The irony hit like a bruise. That night, I lay in bed beside him, the glow of his phone lighting his face while he scrolled, smiling faintly. I turned away, eyes open in the dark, pulse thrumming in my ears. The air between us felt colder than it should. I didn't say a word. I didn't cry. But somewhere deep inside me, something solid began to fracture. Not loudly, not yet. Just enough to let the truth seep in. It was a Thursday, one of those evenings that pretends to be calm just before it unravels. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the city still glistened under the leftover storm light. Everything was slick, reflective, unreal. I was driving home from work, my windshield smeared with the faint ghosts of raindrops, the wipers squeaking every few seconds. I wasn't planning to go anywhere except home, but halfway there, my phone buzzed with a message from Linda. "Come by if you can. Need your opinion on the final decor setup." The text was harmless, efficient, exactly what she'd send any other day, and yet, reading it, my stomach twisted like it knew something I didn't. I stared at the message at a red light, the glow painting my face crimson. For a few seconds, I thought about ignoring it. Going home, pretending everything was still repairable. But curiosity, or maybe survival, has its own gravity. I turned the wheel. Her apartment was only a few blocks away. The air in the hallway smelled like detergent and old carpet, the kind of scent that belongs to buildings holding too many secrets. The lights flickered as I walked. I could hear muffled music behind her door, something soft, jazzy, familiar, the kind of playlist she used when she wanted the world to look effortless. I raised my hand to knock, but the door was already ajar. At first, I thought she hadn't noticed me. The gap was just wide enough for a sliver of light to spill into the hallway. Inside, I could see part of her living room, candles flickering on the coffee table, wine glasses half full. The air shimmered faintly with warmth and something floral. I heard her laugh, low and quiet, followed by another voice that froze my heartbeat in place. "Marks." I didn't move. My body didn't belong to me anymore. My hand stayed suspended in the air, useless. He was saying something. I couldn't catch the words, only the tone, gentle, careful, familiar. The same voice he used when he wanted to convince me that everything was fine. Linda answered, and her tone was softer than I'd ever heard it, the kind people reserve for someone they've already decided to let in. A flicker of movement caught my eye, two silhouettes reflected in the mirror near her entryway. Mark sitting on the floor, leaning against her couch. Linda on the sofa, knees pulled to her chest, glass in hand. Their faces were close. Too close. The kind of distance where breathing sinks on its own. I could have walked away. I should have. But my feet stayed planted. The carpet under me felt like quicksand. I pushed the door open a few inches more. The hinge let out a soft, traitorous creak. They both turned. The look on Mark's face was a blur of emotions, too fast to name. Surprise, guilt, calculation. Linda's expression was worse. Calm, composed. Like she'd already prepared for this moment, rehearsed it in front of that same mirror. "Hey," she said first, as if this was nothing more than an awkward coincidence. "You're early." The words scraped something raw inside me. Early for what? Mark stood, setting his glass down carefully, buying time. "We were just talking about some last-minute changes," he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed him. He couldn't hold my gaze for more than a second. "Changes?" I repeated. My voice didn't sound like mine anymore. "For my wedding?" Linda's lips pressed together, then curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Our wedding," she said quietly, almost tenderly. "You mean our family's wedding. I've been helping you from day one." Her calmness made me dizzy. I took a step forward, the floor creaking under my heel. The smell of candle wax and wine filled my lungs. "Helping?" I said. "You've been writing vows with my fiancé. Meeting behind my back, that's what you call helping?" Mark flinched at the word vows. His silence said more than any denial ever could. Linda sighed softly like she pitied me. "You're overreacting. You've been so overwhelmed I didn't want to stress you more. Mark and I were just trying to keep things on track. By lying to me? Mark took a step toward me, palms raised. It's not what you think. Then what is it, Mark? My voice cracked around his name. Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what I think. The room felt smaller by the second, every candle flickering too bright, too hot. The air pressed against my chest. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, the same steady thud that used to comfort me when he held me. Now it just echoed. Linda stood, slow and deliberate. You're tired, she said softly, her tone the same one she'd used my whole life to make me doubt myself. You always twist things when you're tired. Something in me snapped then, not loudly, not violently, just cleanly, like a thread finally giving way. I looked at her, at him, at the tiny constellation of our life unraveling in that room full of cheap candlelight. I'm not tired, I said. I'm done. Silence. For a heartbeat, none of us moved. The candles hissed. A drop of wax slid down the side of one and hardened mid-fall. Mark's lips parted like he was about to say something, but no sound came. Maybe he realized there was nothing left to say. Maybe he didn't. I turned toward the door, my hand brushing the frame as I left. The hallway outside felt cold, sterile, almost holy in its stillness. Behind me, I heard Linda's voice break through the silence. Quiet, unsteady, not calm anymore. She wasn't supposed to find out like this. The words hit me like wind. I didn't look back. The hallway outside her apartment was too bright. My reflection trembled in the glass door at the end. Eyes wild, jaw tight, a version of me I'd never seen before. I pressed the elevator button once, twice, 3 times. My hands wouldn't stay still. The hum of the city filtered through the cracked window. Distant sirens, laughter from someone's open balcony, the faint hiss of tires on wet asphalt. Everything ordinary. Everything unbearable. The elevator took too long. I could still hear them talking behind the door, their voices muffled, low. I couldn't make out the words, just the rhythm, soft and urgent, the rhythm of people caught in something shameful. The sound of my own breath was louder. I turned, almost running down the stairwell, the air damp and metallic. Every step echoed. Outside, the world looked washed clean, but smelled like rain and exhaust. Streetlights painted long streaks of gold across puddles. I stood under one, gripping my keys until the metal dug into my palm. I wanted to scream, to cry, to hit something. But all I could do was breathe, shallow, uneven. My mind was still in that room. The half-empty glasses, her perfume hanging in the air. His face when he saw me. Pale, stunned, calculating. It hit me then, the absurdity of it. My sister, my fiancé, my 2 constants, the people I'd trusted with every unspoken part of me. The betrayal didn't feel like fire. It felt like drowning, slow, heavy, soundless. When I finally got home, the apartment looked too normal. The lights were still on, my mug from that morning still on the counter, a dried ring of coffee marking where I'd left it. The quiet pressed down like a weight. I sank onto the couch, shoes still on, heart still racing. My phone buzzed. A new message from Mark. Please don't make this worse than it is. The words blurred. I stared until the letters lost meaning. Then another message. Can we talk? You misunderstood what you saw. I laughed, sharp, humorless. My reflection in the dark TV screen looked like a stranger laughing at me. Misunderstood. As if what I'd seen could be repainted into something noble. As if betrayal depended on lighting and angles. A knock came at the door. 3 soft taps. My stomach clenched. I didn't move. The knock came again, a little firmer. Please, his voice said from the other side. Just let me explain. I didn't open it. I couldn't. I leaned back against the wall, eyes closed, listening to the sound of him breathing through the door. It wasn't angry breathing. It was careful, controlled. The kind of breathing that belongs to someone who still thinks he can fix things with words. "Linda's upset too," he said. "You're twisting everything. She was just helping." That broke something in me. A small, bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. "You should go," I said quietly. He hesitated. I heard him shift his weight, keys jingling in his hand. "You don't understand what's been happening." "You're right," I said, voice steady now. "I don't understand how you could do this. I don't understand how she could." Silence. Then the faint sound of him exhaling, a sound like defeat. "I didn't mean for you to get hurt." The simplicity of it hurt worse than anything. He still thought this was about damage control, not devastation. I waited until his footsteps faded down the hall. Then I locked the door. Not once, but twice. The click of the deadbolt was small, but it felt final. For a while I just sat on the floor, back against the door, staring at the shadows stretching across the ceiling. My phone buzzed again. Linda this time. I didn't look. I couldn't. But the sound of her name vibrating across the screen was enough to bring the tears. It wasn't the crying kind of sobbing, not loud or cinematic, just quiet, exhausted tears that slipped out before I noticed. They tasted like metal and soap, and every unspoken apology I'd never get. Eventually I stood, moving on autopilot. I poured the remaining wine from the fridge into the sink, watched it swirl red down the drain. I blew out the candle on the counter, eucalyptus, her favorite, and the smoke curled up in soft gray ribbons before vanishing. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was emptiness. I walked to the bedroom, stopped at the doorway, stared at the space we'd shared, the dent on his side of the bed, the charger still plugged in, his book left open face down. The smell of him still in the air, my throat closed around it. There are moments when the truth stops being something you fear and starts being something you wear. Heavy at first, then grounding. That was this moment. I wasn't numb. I wasn't broken. I was awake. And even though my world had just been gutted, some small, fierce part of me, the part that had been silent for months, whispered one thing, clear and certain. You won't let this define you. The morning after felt wrong from the moment I opened my eyes. The light was too bright, the air too still. My alarm hadn't gone off, but I was awake anyway, my body refusing to rest. The pillow beside me was cold, the sheets untouched. For the first time in months, I didn't check my phone. I already knew what waited there. Apologies, explanations, and lies disguised as context. The city outside was alive, traffic humming, a dog barking somewhere below, but my apartment felt sealed off like I'd fallen out of the world. Every object carried weight. The folded napkin from our engagement dinner still tucked in the kitchen drawer, the photos of us smiling in perfect symmetry on the wall. I stood there for a long time, barefoot on the hardwood floor, letting the silence stretch until it became something I could almost bear. I made coffee the way I always did, 2 scoops, splash of cream, but even the smell betrayed me. It was his brand, his ritual. I poured it down the sink and started again with mine. The sound of it hitting the drain was oddly satisfying, like erasing a line someone else had written. Then I opened my phone. Dozens of messages, from both of them. Marks were predictable. Please talk to me. It's not what you think. I love you. Don't do anything rash. Linda's were shorter. You need to calm down. Let's talk in person. And then one that made my vision blur for a second. You're blowing this out of proportion. We didn't do anything wrong. I almost laughed, out loud. Because what kind of person uses we in a sentence like that? I typed a reply, then deleted it. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly. Every version I wrote sounded too small for the scale of what they'd done, so I didn't send anything. Not yet. There's a certain power in silence, the kind they didn't expect from me. Instead, I got dressed, slowly, deliberately, jeans, sweater, boots. Not the girl who waited for an explanation. The woman who'd had enough. the woman who finally saw clearly. My reflection in the mirror looked pale but steady. The faint puffiness under my eyes told its own truth. I packed a small overnight bag, not because I planned to leave forever, but because I needed space, real space. I threw in my charger, my toothbrush, the ring he'd given me. I didn't even bother with the box, just dropped it into the bag like something that had lost its meaning. When Mark knocked again around noon, I was ready. His voice was soft through the door. "Can we talk? Please." I opened it just enough for him to see that I wasn't crying anymore. His eyes flicked to the bag in my hand. "You're leaving?" "For now." He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture too familiar. "You can't just walk away from this." "I already did," I said quietly. "You just didn't notice." He looked at me then, really looked, and I could see the panic behind his composure. He reached for me, and for a second I almost flinched out of habit. But I didn't move. I let the silence settle heavy between us. "I made a mistake," he said finally. "It wasn't. We didn't. It wasn't like that." "Then what was it?" My voice didn't rise. I didn't need it to. "What do you call late-night calls, secret messages, deleted texts? What do you call the look you gave her when you thought I wasn't watching?" He opened his mouth, closed it again, no script, no defense. "I trusted both of you," I said, the words coming out steadier than I expected. "You broke something that doesn't have a name. And the worst part is, you probably think you can fix it." "I love you," he said, almost desperate now. "Doesn't that matter?" I thought about it for a moment. Not to be cruel, but because the question deserved honesty. "It used to," I said. "But love without respect isn't love. It's convenience." He looked small then, smaller than I'd ever seen him. I felt nothing but clarity, a clean, cold sort of peace. "I need time," I said, stepping past him into the hallway. "And you need to understand that time won't fix this. It'll just show me how much stronger I can be without you." He didn't follow. Maybe he knew better now. The elevator ride down felt endless. The mirrored walls reflected my face back at me from every angle. Tired, raw, but unmistakably alive. The kind of alive that comes after a long numbness. Outside, the air smelled like rain again. I walked until my hands stopped shaking, until the noise of the city swallowed the echo of his voice. By the time I reached the corner, I slipped my ring into my coat pocket. It felt lighter there, like it belonged to someone I used to be. I didn't know where I was going yet, only that I wasn't going back. And for the first time in a long time, that uncertainty didn't scare me. It felt like freedom disguised as fear. I didn't go far that day, just far enough to breathe air that didn't smell like them. I checked into a small boutique hotel on the edge of the city, the kind of place people pick when they want to disappear quietly. The lobby smelled faintly of cedar and rain. A single lamp lit the reception desk, and the woman behind it didn't ask questions. I liked her instantly for that. My room was simple. White sheets, soft yellow lighting, a window that overlooked an alley with a flickering streetlight. I dropped my bag by the bed and sat down, the mattress sighing under me. The quiet here was different, not suffocating, not accusing, just quiet. My hands finally stopped trembling. After a while, my phone buzzed again, dozens of missed calls, more messages. But one stood out, Linda's. "Please, can we meet? You're twisting this into something it's not." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then I wrote back one sentence. "Fine. Tomorrow, somewhere public." I didn't owe her that meeting, but I needed it. Not for closure. That word's too soft, but for confirmation. I needed to look her in the eye and see the truth unfiltered, without Mark's shadow hovering between us. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The sound of distant rain tapping against the glass reminded me of every night I'd spent overthinking, pretending everything was fine. I thought of our childhood, of the nights we used to share a blanket fort, whispering secrets about crushes and futures we didn't understand. How did we get from that to this? How do you lose someone who shares your blood? Morning came too soon. The city was gray, washed out. I met her at a cafe near the park, the kind of place we used to go to after Sunday errands. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window, perfectly put together as always, hair straight, nails polished, coffee untouched. When she saw me, she smiled, that familiar, curated smile. "You look tired," she said, voice soft, rehearsed. "So do you." I sat across from her. The air between us was thick, with the kind of tension that comes when love curdles into something sharp. "I didn't sleep much," she admitted, stirring her coffee, though she didn't need to. "I hate how this has turned into—" "Into what it is?" I interrupted. "You mean into the truth?" She sighed, leaning back, crossing her arms. "You're being dramatic. Nothing happened. You know me better than that." Quote, "I thought I did," I said quietly, "but I don't recognize you anymore." Her eyes flicked up, defensive now. "You're hurt. I get that. But you're creating this story in your head. You always overthink things." "Stop." My voice came out sharper than I intended. "You don't get to gaslight me out of my own reality. Not this time." For the first time, she looked startled. The silence that followed stretched long enough for the sound of cups clinking from other tables to fill the space. "You crossed a line," I said. "You knew what you were doing. Maybe it didn't start as something physical, but you fed it. You liked it. You liked how he looked at you, how I didn't notice, how you could have both of us orbiting you at once." Her lips parted, but no denial came. Only a small flicker of guilt, too quick to hide. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said finally, voice barely above a whisper. "That's the thing," I said. "You didn't care enough to stop." We sat in silence. Outside, the sky hung low and colorless. Somewhere across the street, a bus hissed to a stop. People climbing on, their lives moving forward without hesitation. I envied them, that simplicity of having nothing to confront. Linda looked down, tracing the rim of her cup. "I don't know why I did it," she murmured. "I think I just liked being needed. You always have everything together. And I wanted to matter." Her words hit something old inside me. The childhood rivalry, the unspoken competition. I understood it now, in a terrible human way. But understanding isn't the same as forgiving. "I hope you figure out why that need cost us both everything," I said. "But I'm done paying for it." She nodded slowly, eyes glassy, a single tear catching in her lashes but never falling, the kind of almost crying she'd perfected long ago. I stood, pushing my chair back. The legs scraped against the tile with a sound that felt like finality. "I loved you, you know," I said softly. "Both of you. But love doesn't mean letting people keep cutting you and calling it an accident." She opened her mouth to speak, but I was already walking toward the door. The bell above it chimed as I stepped out into the gray light. The air was cold but clean. I drew a deep breath and felt something shift, a strange lightness that came not from relief but release. For the first time in months, I wasn't walking toward anyone. I was just walking away. And it felt like the first honest step I'd taken in years. The weeks that followed felt like stepping out of someone else's dream. I'd wake up in the hotel room with sunlight creeping across the sheets, half expecting to hear his voice, half dreading it. But there was only the quiet hum of the heater and the sound of my own breathing, uneven, real. The world outside the window kept moving, people hurrying to work, delivery trucks rumbling past, life continuing like it didn't notice mine had split open. Grief comes in strange shapes. It isn't just sadness. It's disbelief, anger, nostalgia, relief, all tangled together until you can't tell one from the other. Some mornings I missed him. Other mornings I missed the version of myself who still believed she was loved without condition. And sometimes the ache wasn't for him at all. It was for Linda. For the sister who used to braid my hair, who'd sneak snacks into our room, who swore we'd never let anyone come between us. I missed that illusion almost more than the relationship. One morning, a week after our last conversation, I packed my bag again, slower this time. No trembling hands, just calm, deliberate movement. I checked out of the hotel, thanked the receptionist, and walked into the crisp daylight. The city smelled like wet asphalt and possibility. I didn't know where I was going, but the not knowing didn't scare me anymore. It almost felt like a clean page. At home, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The apartment felt smaller now, stripped of its false comfort. His things were still there. The jacket on the hook, the cologne on the dresser, reminders of a life that had already ended. I moved through the rooms quietly, picking up pieces of the person I used to be. I threw away the dried flowers Linda had arranged. I packed the framed photos into a box, not to destroy them, just to take away their power. The gold lettering on our unused invitations caught the light before I slid them into the trash bag. For a moment, I thought about saving one. Then I didn't. When I reached the bedroom, I stopped at the nightstand. My ring was still in the coat pocket, where I'd left it days ago. I took it out, held it up to the window. The diamond caught the sunlight and fractured it into dozens of tiny shards. It was beautiful in the same way a blade is beautiful. Sharp, dangerous, reflective. I placed it on the sill and left it there, where the light could do what I couldn't, let it fade. In the weeks that followed, people reached out. My mother called, friends texted, everyone wanting to know what happened. I gave them the short version. We ended things. It's better this way. No one pressed for details. Maybe they heard something in my voice that told them not to ask. The silence between Linda and me became its own language. No texts, no calls, no apologies that could undo the shape of what she'd done. I imagined her life moving on, her mornings, her laughter, her small justifications whispered into her mirror. And I realized, with a strange kind of peace, that I didn't need her remorse to heal. I just needed distance. Healing isn't cinematic. It's not a montage of smiles and coffee cups. It's ugly. It's nights spent replaying conversations, mornings spent deciding not to look at your phone. It's choosing yourself in the smallest, quietest ways, until one day you notice that the ache has dulled, not gone, but softened into something manageable. One evening, I walked to the park near the waterfront, the same one where Mark proposed. The sky was pale gold, the river restless beneath it. I sat on a bench and watched the water carry leaves downstream. I didn't think of him this time. I just thought about how movement itself is proof of life. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I felt something close to gratitude, not for what happened, but for what survived it. Because pain, when you stop running from it, becomes instruction. It teaches you what to protect next time. It teaches you the difference between people who mean well and people who mean harm disguised as care. I walked home slowly, streetlights flickering on one by one, the city exhaling around me. Somewhere behind me, the past was still echoing, faint, distant. But ahead, the world was wide open, waiting. And this time I was walking into it alone, not lonely, but free. Months passed. The seasons turned without asking my permission. Winter melted into a reluctant spring, and with it came a quiet I didn't recognize at first. Not emptiness, not loneliness, just quiet, the kind that settles inside you when there's finally nothing left to prove. People love to talk about closure, like it's something you find waiting for you at the end of pain, a neat little box tied up with understanding. But closure isn't found. It's built, piece by jagged piece. I built mine in the smallest ways, by sleeping through the night without checking my phone, by walking past the bakery where we used to sit and not turning my head, by saying no to things that didn't feel right, even when they came wrapped in sweetness. I found a new apartment, smaller but filled with light, the kind of place that doesn't echo. On the first morning there, I made coffee, my kind, not his, and stood barefoot on the cold tile watching the city wake up. The cup warmed my palms. The steam fogged the window. I caught my reflection faintly in the glass and barely recognized the woman looking back, not because she'd changed, but because she'd finally come home to herself. Linda reached out once. A short email, just a few lines. I think about you every day. I hope you're okay. No excuses, no explanations. Just words hovering between guilt and grief. I stared at it for a long time before closing my laptop. Some doors don't need to be slammed. They just need to stay shut. Sometimes I still catch a scent that takes me back. Eucalyptus, or the particular cologne he wore, and it stings for a second, but the pain doesn't own me anymore. It visits, politely, and leaves when it's done. That's what healing is. Not forgetting, but learning to let memory exist without reopening the wound. I didn't start dating again right away. I didn't feel the need to. People kept telling me I'd find someone better, but that wasn't the point. I didn't need better. I needed real. And real starts with me, with boundaries, with awareness, with the quiet confidence that comes from surviving what you thought would break you. One night, I found myself back at that same waterfront where everything had once begun. The city lights shimmered across the water like distant stars, pretending to be reachable. I sat on the same bench, hands tucked in my coat pockets, listening to the soft rhythm of waves against the pier. A couple walked past, holding hands, laughing in that effortless way that used to make me ache, but this time, I just smiled. Because love isn't the villain. The wrong people are. I thought about all the versions of me that had existed in this story. The hopeful fiancé, the trusting sister, the heartbroken woman, the one who finally walked away. And then I realized something I wish I'd known sooner. Every version of me was worthy. Even the broken ones. Especially the broken ones. Because they were the ones brave enough to start over. When I got home that night, I wrote a single line in my journal before going to bed. Some endings aren't tragedies. They're clarities. And that's what this became. Not the story of betrayal, but the story of awakening. If you've ever had someone you love betray you, someone who looked you in the eyes and made you question your own reflection, I want you to remember this. The pain doesn't mean you were foolish. It means you were real in a world that sometimes rewards pretending. And being real is never something to regret. I turned off the lights, let the city hum beyond my window, and felt the peace settle deeper than sleep. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for anyone to come back. I was already home. Has this ever happened to you? Share your story in the comments.